Hi, I'm Teddy, and today you're listening to Erica Smith, who's running for U.S. Senate in North Carolina on Two Broads Talking Politics. Go get your vaccine!
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly, and this is Two Broads Talking Politics, and I am excited to have on with me a returning guest. With me today is Erica Smith, who is running for U.S. Senate from North Carolina in 2022. Hi, Erica.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, I am delighted to have you back. I looked back, and the last time we talked was not quite 2 years ago. So the whole world has changed since then.
Yes, I believe we talked in the fall of 2019, I believe.
Yeah,
Just
that sounds
before the
right.
2020 primary. In North Carolina, it's always early. It's March.
Right. Yeah. So you ran in 2020 in the primary against that would have been against Tom Tillis, and now this seat is going to be an open seat in 2022 because Senator Richard Burr has said that he is retiring.
Yes. So it will be a wide open seat, and we're very excited. We know we are well positioned to win this race and flip North Carolina blue, finally.
Yes, excellent. So just in case our listeners don't remember all the way back to last time we talked, talk to me just a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, I would love to. I am a Democratic challenger for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. I am a 3-term North Carolina state senator. I represent a rural district in northeastern North Carolina. It's a beautiful place to call home. And so before Senate District 3 was 6 counties, before it was 8 counties, and now it's 6 counties. And so I am just delighted to have served the state of North Carolina for the last 20 years. I started off in local leadership, grassroots leadership. I worked my way up through every level of party leadership, from precinct chair to county party chair, Democratic women chair, African American caucus chair. And so we've had a lot of work doing grassroots organizing in North Carolina. And so I worked for 12 years getting people, good Democrats, strong Democrats, elected up and down the ticket. And as a public school educator, I was challenged by many of the fellow advocates and those in the social justice arena to run for North Carolina Senate. So I did just that in 2014. I was elected, being the first African American woman to serve this district, in the last 242 years. So we are excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I served in the North Carolina Senate for 3 terms, and I ran for U.S. Senate in 2020. I was the second highest vote earner in March of 2020. And so I almost earned about 500,000 votes. It was 417,000 votes, I believe. And I came in second place in the Democratic primary. But our primary was a difficult one. There was a lot of outside influence, undue influence, a lot of tipping of the scale. I led incumbent GOP Senator Tom Tillis in every poll, all the national polls, the statewide polls, and I led him by the widest margins. And so what we're excited about is that we have leveraged and pivoted from 2020. We are in quite a different place today. So much has changed in our nation and in our state in the last 18 months with the pandemic, with the social justice protests. And so we are primed to be the one to take our voices and values to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and so talk to me some about North Carolina. North Carolina is this purple state, keeps sort of. Is it red? Is it blue? Is it purple? What's going on there? And what is it that is happening in North Carolina, where we see some things happening at the state level, and then a different kind of election at the federal level? What are the kinds of things that are really driving North Carolina voters? What gets them out to the polls? What gets them excited?
Right. Well, North Carolina, we are longing for the day that we will be true Carolina blue. And so in this cycle, the 2018 map was politically gerrymandered. And so before that, the U.S. Supreme Court found that the districts were racially gerrymandered. So we have a Republican majority in the North Carolina House, in the North Carolina Senate. Our Council of State is about 50-50. We have a Democratic governor. We have a Republican lieutenant governor. We have a Democratic AG. We have a Republican treasurer. We have a Democratic treasurer of state and state auditor. And we have a Republican labor commissioner. And so when we look at the dynamics of what we're up against in North Carolina, we are a purple state. We flip races. In Council of State, it's about 50-50, but the House has been led by the GOP since 2009. And since 2009, there have been extreme challenges with voter suppression, the redistricting that I spoke about before. There was a monster voter ID bill, which the courts termed that was the with surgical precision. African Americans were disenfranchised from voting, and it was the worst gerrymandering and racial gerrymandering and voter suppression seen since Jim Crow segregation. So that lets you know how bad it is in North Carolina. That's the dynamic that we're challenged with. And so we currently now have two U.S. senators who are Republican. Tom Tillis narrowly beat Cal Cunningham in November. We thought that we were going to win that race. There were some certain challenges at the end, but sadly, the 2020 election showed that every Black woman who ran lost in the general election. And the sad reality is that we got to have some candid and courageous conversations about support of Black women who are the base of the Democratic Party in North Carolina. And we need to have that support in being the face of the party in the up ballot races.
Yeah, so let me follow up on that. We just recently talked to Hanifa Khalik, who's running for U.S. Senate from Indiana, and I asked her the same question. There are currently no Black women in the U.S. Senate, which is terrible. What does it mean, not just for North Carolina, not just for the constituents that you would be serving, but what would it mean if you are elected to all Black women in the country who need to have that voice in the Senate? And coming from a state like North Carolina with a very large African American population, what does that sort of do to drive you and your race?
Absolutely. And I want to start off by sharing one of my favorite quotes from Anna Julia Cooper, who said, "When and where I enter, the entire race enters with me." And the challenge for us is to have the reckoning with representative democracy and what it means in terms of Black women in the United States Senate. There are no Black women, zero Black women currently serving. So people ask me what makes my race different and how would I be different from the other senators that are there? Well, number one, I'll be the only Black woman. Because there are currently none. And when elected, I will be the third African American Black woman in our U.S. history to serve in the United States Senate. Behind the first Black woman to serve was Carol Moseley Braun. And then we had Vice President Kamala Harris. And we certainly are so happy with her historic election. But we do know that we have a void now in the U.S. Senate. What does that mean for my particular campaign? I always tell people I'm not running to be something, I'm running to do something. And in running to do something, I am aspiring to take the voices of those who have not been heard. We've been significantly underrepresented in politics. It's time for us to change our cookie cutter version of electability. Most candidates who run for U.S. Senate are recruited based on being white, being male, having military experience. But we have seen time and time again that that is not the candidate who's been winning races. as we look at the new American majority, we have to be more about diversity and inclusion. We have to understand we need those senators who have the lived experiences that will challenge the status quo, challenge the systems of oppression that are keeping everyday hardworking Americans out of the rings of opportunity that exist. We need somebody who's going to represent the working class. We definitely know that Black women and women in general have had a massive exit from the workforce with COVID-19 pandemic. So what does my election mean? It means the world to the working class, to women who have had to leave the workforce in unprecedented numbers. When we talk about income inequality, Black women only earn 62 cents on the dollar of a white male. Something needs to be done to correct that oppressive pay scale and promote gender equity in pay, but also equity across demographics. Who better to fight for those than someone who's had to navigate that her entire career, and also someone who has set the policy to do that, but can articulate that based on their lived experiences. This is an opportunity to send someone to Washington, D.C., who can represent rural voters. As a state senator in Senate District 3, I am the first and only Black woman to be elected in a pure rural district. Democrats have been losing in the rural parts of our state. The last two cycles, 2016 and 2020, President Trump was able to win because it was the rural areas where he picked up votes. So the last thing that I want to share is the huge movement of Stacey Abrams' playbook, and the 5 Black women who saved this nation, who saved our country by first.
No exaggeration.
I know this is no exaggeration. I am not embellishing at all, but I can remember in November when we were waiting with bated breath and we were like, is Georgia going to flip blue? Georgia, which is south of North Carolina, flipped blue based on the amazing work. And that's why we have a President Biden. That's why we have a Vice President Kamala Harris. And so then when you look at what Georgia did, just 2 months later, barely in January, when they elected Senator Ossoff and Senator Warnock, and it was that historic election where we saw that when you build the broad coalition, because when you leave rural voters behind, you're not just leaving rural white voters behind, you're leaving rural Black voters, you're leaving rural brown voters, you're leaving votes on the table of people who have not been well represented. And so when you build that type of coalition, which is the coalition that I'm building, and I have been building, that's the coalition that we have leveraged to effectively be elected in a very difficult Senate seat to win, the most threatened Senate seat for Democrats in North Carolina. So the exciting thing about what we have learned is that the prime opportunity is to send someone to Washington, D.C. who has the lived experiences, but also, Kelly, has worked with workers who have been, about labor unions and strengthening the dignity of work by raising the minimum wage to a respectable, I call it a survivor's agenda, because you cannot survive off of $7.25 an hour. At minimum, we need to have a wage of $15 an hour. And having been someone who's worked hard all of my life, and not from the wealth class, but from the working class, I can articulate that because I've lived it and I know what people are struggling with. And we need someone who's going to champion and be one of us for all of us. That has been the motto of my campaign. That's the coalition we're building.
Yeah, so I saw that the North Carolina GOP describes you as a radical liberal, which, is sort of their playbook right now.
That is their playbook. It's hilarious.
I love this term survivor's agenda. So tell me a little bit about that. How do you articulate? How do you get that message to the working people of North Carolina or anywhere and get them to understand that what is being portrayed as this, scary socialist progressive movement is about their survival, is about helping them live a dignified life.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you asked. What I call a survivor's agenda is that this COVID-19 pandemic shows us just how broken our healthcare system is. When you have a system that prioritizes profit over people, it is a fail at the outset. And so I support Medicare for all. I supported that in my last campaign. And if you can't talk about health care access for everyone when we are in a worldwide pandemic, then when do you talk about it? Going through COVID-19 has shown us that we do not have the protection with employer based medical insurance. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have lost their jobs. And a lot of them are women because women are heavily dominated in the essential and frontline employees. So a survivor's agenda for me includes healthcare access, universal healthcare plan that goes beyond the Affordable Care Act. Yes, let's fix what's broken with the Affordable Care Act, but at some point we have to understand that we must have a transition to Medicare for all so that everyone can be covered regardless of their ability to pay. And if you like your insurance, yes, keep your insurance. We'll find ways to make that work. But the key is we have got to reach those people who are literally dying or families going bankrupt because somebody gets sick in the family. That shouldn't happen. Health care is a basic human right. Also, the dignity of work must be affirmed with a livable wage. Somebody tweeted the other day and they put a $5 bill, two $1 bills, and a quarter down on the table and said, imagine surviving off of this for working 1 hour. And when you look at the cost of inflation, if the minimum wage was indexed to inflation, it would be somewhere around $24. So at a base level, we should raise the minimum wage so that we can address the extreme wealth gap, the racial wealth gap that has come from a holdover of systemic oppression, from the fact that the federal government laws allowed women to be paid less than men because men were supporting families where women were not. 80% of families in the Black community are headed by Black women. And so, gone is the whole adage that we don't need to have equal pay for equal work. So we definitely need that. That's what I call part of a survivor's agenda. Black women are the most educated demographic, but we have the highest college loan debt. And so I'm for counseling student loan debt. As a Black woman who has aspired and who has been able to earn a degree and working in public education, where you have a lower market salary than definitely what I made as an engineer. There's something to be done with equalizing and promoting that opportunity to have student loan debt and make college affordable for everyone. As Nelson Mandela said, that a quality education is the greatest civil rights tool of the 21st century. It empowers us to change our socioeconomic status. My agenda also includes clean air and clean water. We've got to take care of the only planet that God's going to give us. And so I am definitely a climate justice advocate. I've earned distinctions every term that I served in the North Carolina Senate as Senator of the Year by the industry, by the League of Conservation Voters, by the Sustainable Energy Association. And I believe that we can create jobs, and definitely the racial justice aspect of environmental stewardship is very important to me. So those are that's not a full comprehensive list, but that is what I mean by a survivor's agenda. It is working Americans, working North Carolinians who need to have access and our opportunity to aspire to the American dream. And we cannot do that when we have these systems of oppressions that are barriers that are locking us out.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the climate justice. What we're seeing in Texas this past month, I think really just highlights how unpredictable the climate is becoming. And, North Carolina is going to be right on the front lines climate is such an importance in North Carolina for things like agriculture and tourism, and it seems like it's going to be just increasingly important. I know the Biden administration is focusing on climate and climate justice and everything they're doing, but it's clearly a thing that the Senate's really going to need to be taking up.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that we have a climate czar and that we've re-entered the Paris Accords. Those are huge and big steps. I heard someone talking the other day, and they were not calling it global warming. They were calling it global weirding. It's amazing that the weird weather patterns, these 500-year floods that are coming every 2 years, the district that I serve in was hardest hit by Hurricane Matthew. There are still people who are not able to live in their homes, who are still, in transitional housing from a hurricane that occurred in 2016. Then 2 years later, we had Hurricane Florence. And I am one of the primary sponsors on a provision to provide for mitigation, flood mitigation planning across the state. And definitely we need to have those enhancements in the grid so that what happened in Texas does not happen in North Carolina. And we don't want it to happen anywhere else in our nation. That was just appalling and unconscionable, is because we did not prioritize a clean energy mix and the grid enhancements and alternative energy that wasn't done in Texas. We can no longer continue to rely on big oil.
Yes, absolutely. Well, if our listeners want to make sure that there is a Black woman in the U.S. Senate once again, and that Democrats can continue to build the very slim majority that they have right now, how can they help your campaign?
Well, they can help our campaign by following us. It's Erica for Us, USCN on Twitter, and it's Erica for Us is my website, www.ericaforus.com. So we're excited because North Carolina has an early primary. And we have a primary in March of 2022. We have started early because we have to build those coalitions. I tell a lot of people it takes money to get the word out, to get the vote out, and to register voters. And if you don't have a lot of money, don't give me a lot of money, but a little bit of money here and there, you can do recurring donations. That will be great. And Kelly, I just want to stress, as we shared last time, it's important for Democrats to stop ceding the moral vote or the religious vote. And I am, as an ordained minister, as we saw what Senator Raphael Warnock was able to do, it's important that we elevate men and women of honor, character, and integrity who will put the people first. I don't take a dime of corporate PAC money or fossil fuel money. And in order to do that, I have to run a grassroots campaign, reaching out to grassroots donors to lift me up, because I will be beholden to the people who send me to Washington, D.C. They already have enough senators working for the special interests and the corporations. I'm working for the people of North Carolina and the people of this nation, the workers, those of us who work so hard and want our piece of the opportunity that's available for every American.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. And I am so excited that you're running again and that you came back to speak to me again.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at twobroadstalk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.